एक मिनट रुक जाओ, रेडी होने दो. चलो ये कर लेते हैं. This could be a great intro.
Hi, I'm Akshay.
Hi, this is Saurabh, and you are listening to the Founder Thesis podcast. We meet some of the most celebrated startup founders in the country.
And we want to learn how to build a unicorn.
Hey Akshay, I'm Ameve. I'm co-founder at Kapiva Ayurveda.
Children of family businesses end up taking one of the two routes. Either they join the family business or pursue a path completely different from the family business. But Ameve Sharma, who is from the family running Baidyanath, one of India's oldest Ayurvedic product companies, decided to do something unique. He entered the Ayurveda space with his venture Kapiva, but pursued a very different type of business model that is more in sync with customers of today. This proved to be a very apt choice, giving the fledgling startup access to insider knowledge that comes with decades of experience, while at the same time allowing it to be agile and fast. Listen to this fascinating conversation with Ameve talking about quitting a lucrative consulting job to start up and going through the journey of finding product market fit to eventually scaling Kapiva into a 100 crore D2C brand in the space of Ayurveda. Here's Ameve telling Akshay Dutt about his wonderful journey.
So, Ameve, the first story that I want to hear from you is about the legacy family business. You come from a well-established business family. Tell me about that story. Like, who was the person in your family who started it? How did it start? What kind of environment did you grow up in?
Sure. So the business is Baidyanath, right? So, typically famous for Chyawanprash and Isabgol and your traditional kind of, Ayurvedic products. Started back in 1917 by my grandfather and his brother. So basically, he was very much involved in the freedom movement, my grandfather. And one of the reasons why he got into Ayurveda was, he wanted to kind of get back the legacy of India, of, the sort of knowledge that we had. So I think that so it was very, he was a really kind of different kind of person, like the national poet of India wrote a book about him. Like he was just a really inspirational figure, right? There was very rudimentary kind of packing materials, very labor intensive for sure. But also at that time, scale in general was very much smaller, right? So, people didn't really there weren't that many consumers in India anyway, right? Okay.
So, like when you were growing up, it was understood that you would join the family business.
At that time, the ideas of, at that time it was still the structure we were working in was still a very acceptable structure, right? As businesses grew, things got more and more professional. But expectation was that I would join the family business, right? Grew up very involved in business, right? So started like visiting factories and offices and all at a very young age. Went for market visits and stuff at a very young age. So there was this sort of, it wasn't explicit, but there was this understanding, right? But basically what happened, Akshay, was that at one point I felt that there was more I wanted to do, right? I felt that, in the family business, there was a way to kind of professionalize it, right? And, with the family setup, it's better to go down the professional route than kind of, me being involved, right?
So before you actually joined full-time, what did you do in terms of education? Like
I did a double major in national politics and economics at NYU. Post that, actually, I was supposed to actually get a work in LA, but I graduated a semester early, which was a bad idea, 2008 December, which was the middle of the financial crisis. So I didn't get the exact job that I wanted to, honestly, right, out of college. And I had a job, but I thought working in the business would be better experience.
How was the McKinsey stint like? Like, what did you learn in that stint?
Sure. So I would say the biggest learning, honestly, Akshay, was that how to take a larger problem, break it into smaller pieces and make it very solvable, right? And also discipline and structure, right? I think, I didn't know what it meant to work hard until I went to McKinsey, right? I thought, 9 ghante bahut hote hain, right? But then, when you see people slogging like 13, 14 hours, you realize, there's a different class, right? Really taught me a lot of discipline, really taught me like hard work to a different level, right? And, end of the day, what I realized is that if you enjoy your work, it's not work anymore, right? You need to work hard to be successful. That was obvious, right? But you can only really work hard if you enjoy what you do, right? आप कितने सालों तक, if you're not enjoying what you do, can you work for 12 hours a day? I don't think you can, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So funnily enough, after McKinsey, I started kind of thinking about what to do next, right?
So, but if you were enjoying McKinsey, why did you want to do something next?
I had met, my co-founder actually went to Xavier's Bombay with one of my really close friends from Calcutta, right? So I knew him through him. When I came to Bombay at McKinsey, I didn't really know anyone. So he ended up being one of the first few people I met, right? So we got friendly. And then he wanted to start something as well, right? So, we actually spend a lot of time trying to figure out what to do, right? And we talked about everything from tech to fund to food to restaurants, right? Funnily enough, we ended up in Ayurveda. It was quite funny. But honestly, we felt that was the largest opportunity at the time, right? We saw it exploding. And so, we spent a lot of time discussing what we wanted to do. I was quite clear that I wanted to leave McKinsey. I was there for the experience. I was there for the learning. I was not there for the long term.
Right.
It was not something where I knew that from day one. And I wanted to start. So I started after a year or so trying to figure out what I wanted to do.
Okay.
So that's when me and Shrey kind of started talking, and that's how kind of Kapiva was born.
So what was the thesis, initial thesis? Like, what did you want to do?
So a couple of things, right? There were a lot of things that I wanted to do in the original business in Vietnam, which I was not able to, right? Because of whatever reasons, like, bureaucracy, process, whatever, right? And and a big part of it was actually breaking Ayurveda out of the mold it was stuck in, right? Now, I told you, my grandfather wanted to create this Indian Ayurvedic business, right? But the fact of the matter is that all Ayurvedic businesses today, traditional businesses, are very much westernized, right? Ayurveda is not about problem solution, right? Ayurveda is about staying healthy, being healthy. It's about balance, right? The name Kapiva comes from the three doshas, Kapha, Pitta, Vata.
Okay.
And the whole idea about Ayurveda is to have a balanced lifestyle, balanced body, so you don't get sick, right? And a small part of it is that, symptomatic relief if you get sick, right? Today, 99% of Ayurveda has become that small problem solution piece, right? And the 99% of real Ayurveda, which is actually staying healthy, is kind of lost, right? So Ayurveda is, to get good Ayurveda treatment, right? You need to, for complicated treatment, you need a doctor.
Right. Yeah.
Very difficult to kind of just go pick stuff off the shelf for something serious, right? If you have constipation or something like that, it's fine, right? But for something more serious, you need to meet a doctor, and very few good quality Ayurvedic doctors out there.
Right.
Also because the number of them graduating is very low, right? The government has been doing some good work in trying to increase it in the last couple of years, but it's a long gestation period.
Yeah.
Right, to make that happen.
And this was, I think around 2017 is when you started, right?
Late 2016, roughly. Yeah. So we started the clinics late 2016.
But how did you fund this? Setting up a clinic and all that?
So we started with the initial funding round of maybe about $400,000, right? I put in some money and Shrey put in some money. And we also got some family and friends to kind of invest, right? So we started with 400 grand, and that got us 5 stores, right?
And this was like a service business at that time, not a product business.
So basically, so we had a product line as well. So we created in-house products, right? And then you walked into the store, half the store would be Kapiva products, half the store would be third-party products, and then you had a Ayurvedic doctor and sometimes a nutritionist, etc. in the store. So you could come get customized advice for what products to take.
How much were these stores making?
So we recuperated our cost within about 7-8 months.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
It started being profitable 9-10 months, which is actually very good for retail.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
The problem, and we created a very efficient box, right? So it was like a 300 square foot store.
Okay.
Very cheap to set up, right? And we spent a lot of time building that model. We thought we'll build 100 of them, 200 of them, right? But we built 5, but we very quickly realized that this business was going to be impossible to scale.
Why is that?
2 reasons. The first was that because it was a very small box, right? The break even for a store was 4-5 lakhs, and good stores were doing 6-7 lakhs, right? And the maximum you would do is 8 lakhs, which is a good outcome per month, right? So to create, and Shrey before this worked in private equity, right? I had a decent family business. The ambition was large. the ambition was not to create something small. The ambition was we wanted to create something big and impact a lot of people, right? The first thing I remember we still said and we still talk about today is that we wanted to make 5 million Indians live a healthier life, right?
Okay.
That was the, sort of first level goal, right? That how do we make 5 million households rather, be healthier, live healthier, have better sort of health outcomes. And end of the day, we found that this would not be that business, right? Because opening a store, was becoming very, very time consuming, right?
Yeah, you need to finalize place, negotiate lease, do the interiors.
Correct. And also what we found was that doctors very quickly would move on, right? So we would spend a lot of time hiring a doctor, training them, and then, they would look for another opportunity, right? Because high quality doctors, right, don't actually want to sit in a store. That's the fact, right? Okay. So we had bought at that, they want to do R&D, they want to do manufacturing, right? Eventually, right? Very few of them want to do chikitsa. And if they want to do chikitsa, if you're an MD, then eventually your dream is to have your own clinic, which is fair, right? So we found that a lot of young doctors would come, we would train them, a lot of after doing the MD, and then they would move on very quickly, right? So we were really struggling to scale, right?
These the Kapiva branded products that you had on the store, how did you get those ready so fast?
Sure. So we of course leveraged a lot of the back end from the family business, right? There is also a lot of contract manufacturing we got done from my business as well. And see, honestly, it was, even till today, I would say the family business is a huge help, right? Like having that background in Ayurveda, being able to pick up the phone and call someone for advice, even, something as simple as sourcing raw materials, right? It's not easy
right.
to get the right quality at the right time at the right price, right? So, all of the supply chains for even our contract manufacturers, we've built out, right? We've told them when to buy what raw material from where, because that really makes a big difference, right?
Right.
So at that time also, we got a lot of support from the business. Still, from a knowledge point of view, then we get a lot of support, right? So once we started the store, we found that scalability was a problem, but at the same time, it was kind of the best place in the world to do market research, right?
Okay.
So you have a store where, and me and Shrey spend a lot of time in the physical outlets, right? Talking to customers. So we must have spoken to, I don't know, maybe 1,000 Ayurvedic customers by the end of the year, right? Maybe more, right? And in a way, if you think about it, it's a store where you have a brand new, unknown brand, right? Called Kapiva. And then you have 5 very well-known brands next to it, right? So it kind of very clearly showed us where the gaps in the market were, what consumers were moving toward, what they wanted, right? And taking the same vision we had initially, right? We realized that there's another big part of Ayurveda we could provide potentially at scale to people, right? Which is actually something which exists to some extent, but not really, which is Ayurvedic foods or Ayurvedic nutrition, right?
This is Chyawanprash is a part of this.
Kind of, yes. Chyawanprash is on the borderline, right? So I would say on one hand, you have medicinal Ayurveda, right? Which is capsules, cough syrup, cough syrup, you have the tablets, blah, blah. On the other hand, like what we have, for example, now are Ayurvedic breakfast, right? So Ayurveda, for example, has a very clear point of view ki what grains are good, right? What kind of, so for example, we have a Ayurvedic breakfast with barley, amaranth, oats, five great grains with amla, haldi, and tulsi, right? With Ayurvedic herbs, with high fiber, high protein, very low calorie, and no preservatives, no additives, right? So so basically incorporating the principles of Ayurveda in health, in food, right? And kind of creating a Ayurvedic nutrition brand.
And so, when did you realize that this is the way to go? Initially you had those stores.
So what we figure out, 2-3 things actually, right? So what we figure out is that, I'll give you an example in my house, right? I've been having a shot of amla juice every morning since I was 8 years old, right?
Okay.
We have this very funny thing, we take after lunch, we actually, in my family, it's like a tradition we have, we take dahi, we put ashwagandha powder and honey. And that's like a dessert, right? So we incorporate Ayurveda into our daily lives, right? So I take Ayurvedic herbs as part of my daily sort of supplements, right?
Right.
So, and we found it that we found that to be really something very different, right? Like and I think I keep telling my father at least take out 5 minutes and be my spokesman, right? He's like the epitome of health at like, I don't want to jinx it by saying his age, but yeah, at his age, right? Like people can't believe it when I tell him what age they are, right? So I've seen how it can really, in the long term benefit you and keep you healthier, right? And see, Ayurveda actually is very simple, right? Ayurveda is just good food, right? It's like, amla is the richest source of vitamin C in the world, right? End of the day, a lot of Ayurveda you can actually measure in nutrition, right? So the same way, like, you eat like a lot of spinach, you get a lot of fiber, right? Ayurveda will prescribe something like a Isabgol, which is pure 100% fiber, right? So a lot of Ayurveda is actually very simple, right? And there's also now a lot of data on Ayurveda, right? Especially, so the number one, let's say, digestion product in Europe is Ayurvedic, right? The only FDA-approved product globally for liver is Ayurvedic, right? So there is a bunch of research happening now in Ayurveda in the US, in Europe, in Canada, on things like ashwagandha, turmeric, and a lot of it has been very positive, right? Most large pharmaceutical companies now, right, from your Pfizers have a not Ayurvedic but herbs division, where what they do is like they look at herbs that have been used across the world, try to isolate the active ingredient and synthesize it. Right. So, there's a lot of work going on, and Ayurveda that way is a very simple kind of thing to understand. But that's why, it's about good nutrition, eating well every day, right? So we wanted to bring that daily health angle of Ayurveda, where there's a saying in Ayurveda that, and in English, roughly, it's health is not the absence of illness, but it's the presence of vitality, right? That, when you wake up in the morning and you're like ready to go, right? Your eyes open and you're fresh, right? And, you're like energetic throughout the day, right? And those things, right? The very, very key indicators of good health, right? And what we found, right? The second reason why we realized that, and nutrition-based products are very key for lifestyle problems, right? So, but when I say lifestyle problems, what do I mean, right? And these have become very prevalent today. Digestion is a big one in Ayurveda, right? Everything starts from your stomach. Skin, hair fall, having blood sugar, raised blood sugar at a young age, right?
Diabetes
but not diabetes, but diabetes is something where we don't, but nutrition becomes very difficult then, right? Then you need a lot of different things. But when you have, let's say, high blood sugar, then even a doctor will tell you nutrition is the key thing to solve, right? Let's say if you have hair fall, right? You go to a doctor, first thing they'll tell you is that hair is the part of the body which is deprioritized the most when you have nutrition, right? So more than applying something on your head, more important is good nutrition, right? So there's a lot of these problems which is solved by good nutrition. What we did as a step one in the new business was that we wanted to solve the food part of it, right? So the idea was that how do we kind of create this whole category called Ayurvedic foods? How do we incorporate Ayurvedic wisdom and kind of give people better quality nutrition, right? We were at the same time very aware of number 2 and 3 also, right? Because number 2 and 3 are also very important, right? You can't, one is still incomplete, right? So we already are today doing that, and we're working a lot about creating an entire ecosystem, right? So we as a company don't see ourselves as a product company, right? We see ourselves as an Ayurvedic ecosystem where you get knowledge. Till today, we offer free consultation on our website with Ayurvedic MDs, right? So you can go on a website, any problems, talk to them. They'll give you an entire detailed nutrition plan. 70% of the stuff they suggest is not from Kapiva, right? So our ambition is that, boss, give the best possible thing, right? So if you have it, great. If you don't, give whatever's best, right? We have a lot of content, and we now created, got together a huge team. We've actually tried to get a lot of people from Kyojoy, which I believe is one of the best content creators for Ayurveda. And we are now creating a bunch of Ayurveda content around lifestyle, what not to eat is as important as what you eat, right? So definitely we sell products, but then the ambition.
Tell me about the pivot phase, like from running stores to becoming a food product.
Sure. So like company. I said, right, the ambition, right, was always to bring a genuine form of Ayurveda out, right? Like I said, there were 2 ways to do that, right? One was the doctor-led sort of better quality medicine. The second was the more sort of nutrition, food, lifestyle based, right? They both require doctors, to be honest, and they both require, it's all very connected, but depends which route you go, right? So we decided that the physical route wasn't the way to solve this problem. The digital route was the way to solve this problem, right? How do we kind of scale up advice. How do we create a lot of content? How do we create products? How do we increase availability, right? And the way to actually do what our initial goal was, which is 5 million Indians live better through Ayurveda, right? Was going to be a much more difficult store by store by store, and probably will be 80 by the time we reach that goal, right? So, and online had started to take off a little bit there. We had done a few experiments with both online as well as offline distributions, and we found that there was a lot of scope for growing the business from that, right? That's when the pivot started happening, right? Initially, it's
So
very
you
difficult.
shut down the stores, or
That's what I'm coming to, right? Very difficult. The stores we had invested money into them. They had reached
right.
break even and profitability, right? It was a very difficult decision, right? Initially, we were like, we'll do both, right? We keep the stores and we'll do this also. But basically, we were a small team. We had very little funding, right? So we couldn't go ahead and like hire 50 people, right? We had raised another round at that time from angels, right? So there was this guy who was called Madhu Kela, who was the ex-CIO of Reliance, who invested some money. Rich Food owners invested some money, right? There was a small sort of investment bank set up that invested some money, right? So we raised another about, I would say, $800,000 at the time, and we tried to kind of do both, right? Run the stores and do this, but very quickly realized that, boss, we don't have the bandwidth, right? They're two totally different businesses. We're not at a scale where we can do two things, right? So then finally, somewhere around, mid 2017, end 2017, right? We took the decision that, boss, you have to close the store, right? There's no other way around it. And then finally, around 2018 early, we finally ended up closing the stores. And we then had a much more focused point of view on growing the sort of product FMCG.
Digital. Okay. So what was the digital distribution? Was it like through marketplaces that you started listing products?
So initially, we were purely marketplaces and offline, right? So we started from day one and offline. So we started selling in like large walkthrough stores, right? So in Bombay, like a Patel or Krishna, like that, like those large format stores.
Like DMart and
not modern trade. Initially, we didn't want to pay the listing fees on modern trade, honestly. So we went to like what we call today standalone modern trade, right? So these are standalone walkthrough stores that you find in neighborhood. There's about 10,000 of these in India actually, and we would spend a lot of time creating content as well. But what we realized is that we would try to put a lot of content. Like for example, every juice bottle had a yoga pose, which was helpful for the problem that juice was trying to solve, right? We would put pamphlets, we would put a lot of A+ content on Amazon. Very quickly realized that we need our own platform, right? If you really want to disseminate information, there's no other way, right? So then, that's when Kapiva.in came in, right?
Okay.
And then now Kapiva.in is slightly just overtaken Amazon as the largest kind of platform. So yeah, that whole pivot happened. We raised then our first proper Series A.
When did you launch Kapiva.in? Which year?
I would say
18, I guess.
End 18, mid to end 18. Yeah. And we started scaling it properly, though I would say 19, to be honest, right? We launched it in 18, like we didn't know anything, right? I didn't know what I was doing, like, right? So I launched the website, I was learning on the go. It took me some time to figure it out, right? And we weren't really that well funded at the time, right? So nowadays I see startups, and probably a good idea only. They go out and they raise $10 million, and the full team is there on day one, right? Yeah. So it probably works well, right? But we didn't have that. We were still like, boss, we have to build it. I come from a traditional business as well, right? So so we were trying to figure things out. So it took time, right? Now I would say like one of the things I'm most proud of in Kapiva as a team, right? I think we've really built a solid team. We've really managed to get some fantastic talent from some of the best companies out there, right? And growth has also kind of been accordingly. Now they've really come in and taken it to a different level, right? But back then we were still just figuring stuff out on a daily basis, right?
Okay. Yeah. So you were talking about your Series A. When did that happen?
So we raised our Series A end 2018 early. So it was in two tranches, end 18, early 19. It was led by Fireside. At that time, the company had started to get some traction, right? And our angels also all topped up, right? So it was a combination of that. Fireside, really, I would say, I still am so appreciative of them. Like they really were a fantastic investor to have at that time, right? Like, they had people like, so there's one guy at Fireside called Vinay who had a lot of experience online, right? Our board member Kanan, he had fantastic experience with offline distribution, brand, right? He was CEO at Dabur for many years. so understood the category very well, right? So really the perfect investor for us, right? Like I think that was like super happy about that decision till today. So they came in, and that's when, we really started being able to grow a lot faster, right? We raised about a total of $2.5 million, right, at that time. And that's when we really started to grow as a business, right? We started to hire better people, right? We started to get a lot.
What kind of revenue were you at around that time? Like 18, end of 18, early 19?
So March of 19, we would have been at roughly about a crore and a half, I would say. No, actually, maybe a crore, probably a crore.
And there's 3 channels. One is Kapiva.in, second is Marketplace, third is the standalone modern trade. And what was the split between these 3 channels at that time?
So actually, offline was big that time. Offline was about 50%, 50-60%, and the balance was online, right? Actually, March 2019 is when online started to take off for us, right? Amazon started to grow, our website started to grow very aggressively. And that's when we realized that, so today offline is 8% of our sales from 50%. Right?
Wow.
And it's grown. It's not like it's not grown, right? It's grown year on month on month on month. It's just like online has grown a lot faster, right? So, just to give you a little idea of the journey, we were roughly about, let's say, a crore in maybe about 90 lakhs in March of 19, right? March of 20, we're probably about 2.5-ish, right? And then March of this year, we were around about 5.5, 6, right?
Wow.
So
okay.
Through like we don't have one of those stories where we went from 1 to 500 crores in a year, right? I know there are a few of them. We took our time to grow, but we've grown like 250-300% year on year, right? Today we're roughly about 100 crore business, like round about.
Right? Okay. Like this year, you'll cross 100 crore.
Our current run rate is somewhere around 100 crores. And annual will also be somewhere around there, correct?
So what are like the secrets to that success? Like how did it grow so fast? What are the things you did to make it grow?
Made a lot of mistakes, right? Let me not pretend like we didn't. A lot of things we got wrong in the beginning. I would say today, looking back, right, the 2 most important things. Number 1 is that have a very strong data infrastructure and use data to make decisions, right? I think people always delay that. Right? If I had more insights through data earlier, I would have been able to grow faster.
Give me an example of what that means, like deciding what product to put on the homepage.
No, but like understanding how consumers are behaving, right? Understanding consumer funnels, understanding what retention actually is, what LTV actually is, So I think stuff like that, you need to have a very strong data infrastructure to get that live data, right? Very easy to kind of take Excel and put it together once in 3 months and try to make that decision. But, on a daily basis, if you're looking at LTV versus AOV, right, your decision will be very different, right?
Well, just help me understand these terms. For someone who's not from this space, what is LTV? What is AOV?
So LTV would be a long-term consumer value, right? So let's say if a consumer AOV would be average order value. So let's say today you're coming in and buying for $1,000, right? So my mind, I'm looking at my consumer acquisition cost and I'm looking at what I'm making today, right? But the reality of it is that what's really important is how many times is that consumer coming back and what is the actual lifetime value of the consumer, right? And then certain products, for example, will have very high AOV. You're like, oh, this is doing really well. Let me push this product. But there are certain products where consumers are actually loving it and coming back to buy 20 times. So the LTV would be much higher, right? So just a small example, right? And if I had the clear data, then you would put your money on long-term bets, right? Not on short-term things. And you need data for that, right? The second thing is that focus on retention, right? Paid acquisition is not sustainable, right? We invested a bunch of money initially on Google, Facebook, trying to acquire customers, right? But in reality, what really helped us grow, right, is giving the consumers the best possible experience so they come back often, right? So it's not about, the most important thing is the product, especially in a health thing, right? Good health outcomes, right? If someone is buying a product for a specific problem, it should have a solution, right? But also a lot of other things matter, right? Delivery time, right? Customer support, right? And honestly, people like Amazon have set the bar.
Right. Yeah. Next day delivery,
like if you have a complaint, they'll refund you immediately. So, you have to benchmark yourself to Amazon, right? Yeah. So a lot of people think, no, Amazon is there, but that's the competition. You have to accept it, right? So building a fantastic customer service system, really replying to customer grievances very quickly, right? Having a very liberal cancellation policies, right? If somebody has a problem, cancel it, right? give them refunds quickly, things like that. So spend a lot of time not only on having a fantastic product, but on consumer delight, right? Consumers should have a fantastic experience when they're buying from you, right? And that's when they come back.
How did you build the data infrastructure? So you said that data infrastructure is super important. What does that mean? Like, does it mean hiring data scientists, or does it mean investing in some software? Or
Sure. So I would say we're still building a data infrastructure. Honestly, it's a process that never stops, right? Whenever you think that you're good, you see something that's much better, right?
Okay.
So we're constantly in the process of improvement. But as a first step, what I did was that I spoke to like 10 people, right, who've already done a fantastic job with this, right? Our Series B investors, who is Vertex, right? They have a lot of tech companies that they've invested in, right? Fireside also has a bunch of companies that have scaled a lot. Like Mammoth has done a fantastic job. So they have also strong data backend. So spoke to a lot of founders. There's a lot of sort of, I wouldn't say mentors, but advisors, right, that I speak to. I feel that, there's no need to reinvent the wheel every time. Definitely innovate. But if someone has already done something well, the least you can do is understand that in great detail, right? So got a lot of advice, spoke to a lot of people, and kind of figured out what the right sort of way forward is. Then we did a couple of hires. We are now hiring data people. We've hired a first data person now.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So we didn't have, but we had people who understood data, who worked with data, but they're not data scientists, right? I would say potentially, and the reason why I brought this up, I would say potentially we were late. Looking back, I should have probably hired people a little bit earlier, right? Better late than never, I would say. And we did hire people who understood it. And we did use like outside help, right? So we use agencies, we use tech companies to kind of help us build it out. But basically the thing is that if you don't build it with that mind, don't build your website with that mindset on day one, it's very difficult to do it retrospectively, right? As a website ban gaya hai and you haven't put it in place, then it becomes very complicated. So the most important thing is when you're building a website, keeping it in mind.
And when did you do the Series B? And how much was that?
Sure. So Series B was early this year, right? Or late last year, actually, rather. So we finished on November last year. We raised about $10 million.
And what are you valued at now?
Our Series B was somewhere around, so we raised about 10-12 million. We diluted about, let's say, about 18-20% roughly. And then now we're like about 70% bigger than what we were then, or 80% bigger. So we don't really have a new valuation, but we haven't really gone to the market.
So how did the lockdown impact you? Did you see offline falling?
So initially it was a disaster, right? Initially, so when the lockdown was first happening, right, which is April of last year, I was like just about to close a bridge round, and then COVID happened, right? It was really stressful, but and the first month was chaos, right? Everything just shut down, right? There was no factories, there was no Amazon, there was nothing, right?
Even your supplies would have been disrupted.
Exactly, right? But we really, we kind of saw the lockdown coming to some extent because it was happening globally. So we built up a lot of inventory, right? We actually made a full lockdown plan, right, a month earlier, and said that, okay, this is going to happen. So what do we do about it? So we built up a lot of inventory. We got alternate suppliers for a lot of our key products. In case one shuts down, we can go to another. We've stuffed Amazon with inventory, right? We said, boss, rakho, we do FBA, right? We stuffed our distributors with inventory. So we really just tried to stuff the channel. Gave a little bit of credit to do it, but we did it, right? That really helped us bounce back very quickly, right? So April was, of course, a disaster, right? We tanked, but May was we bounced back quite a bit in May.
Right. Okay. So what is your customer acquisition strategy? Do you rely on more of content as a way to get ranking on search engines, or do you do paid acquisition, or
Sure. So actually, honestly, we spent very little on consumer acquisition until I would say 6 months ago, right? So to build, we raised a Series B, right, and that's when we started spending, right? But as an organization, we spend actually very little money to get to where we are. We always trying to be very efficient, right? Now in retrospect, maybe we could have been more aggressive. But for example, we're starting our first ATL campaign, which is our brand campaign, this month, right?
Okay.
We've never done any brand marketing, right? we started performance.
Like on TV or where?
So yeah, like YouTube ads and stuff like that, right? We started performance marketing at any scale for the first time early this year, right? Which is paid acquisition, right? So a lot of our early acquisition was honestly just word of mouth, right? We have fantastic retention from our consumers, right? Our retention for products, some products like 40% plus, and I'm talking about like just on our website, right? Our average consumer, doing the math, our average consumer on Amazon, right, buys us 5 times in a year, right? So we have really good sort of repeats, and a lot of consumers who've gotten good results, right, become your advocates, right? In healthcare, right, what we've noticed is that if you have something effective, something that works, right, people will tell 10 people about it and they'll recommend, right? And that's a very common way where people actually end up trying something, right? Where friends, family, etc. tell them, try this, it really works, right? So a lot of our acquisition and growth actually came completely organically, right? 6 months ago, we did start spending on Facebook, Google. But again, it's not our key strategy, right? Like only like a minority of our revenue comes from paid on our website, right? What we are growing now aggressively is content, right? Because people are hungry for content in healthcare, right? And we want to go down a very sort of validated scientific route, right? Like, have very high rigor in our content we create, have very clear sightings of sources, look at studies and try to create, very solid, high quality content, which is stand up to scrutiny anywhere, right, globally. And we feel that we can really create a lot of content to be able to allow consumers to take the right decision of what's good for them, right? We also have a lot of sort of integrations to guide consumers through their journey through our website, right? So I mentioned that, we have doctor consultations, right? Which we do almost 200-300 a day, right? On top of that, we also have something called, a customized user journey we create, right? So today we do it through telesales, right? Where you can talk to, a specialist or a nutritionist that can kind of help guide you through your journey. But going forward, we're trying to make this more tech-based, right? So that's something
like through an app, you enter some information and
don't want to say much about it right now because we're still working on it. But that's something we'll have in the next few kind of months, right? So the idea is to use things like that to acquire consumers, which are long-term, which, actually grab value and talk about that in our advertising. I think, paid acquisition through Google, Facebook can be strategic, but can't be a long-term sort of plan. That's what we feel.
But do you, do you see yourself being mass market FMCG like Dabur, or, which has, like, say, even a toothpaste with Ayurvedic benefits and, so it's like mass market. So do you see that path? So,
we have a few filters, right, that we put before we launch any product, service, anything, right? I think the first filter is it something that's really benefiting the consumer in a real way, right? So that's the first filter product needs to pass through from, and we have multiple ways of checking that, including consumer trials, right? And doing a lot of research and on that. See, the beauty today is actually there's a lot of research globally done on Ayurveda, right? So if you want to find out about an ingredient, there's probably 50 clinical trials you can go through globally, right? So we spend a lot of time creating a fantastic product, right? If it passes through that filter, right? I think the second filter is is it at least something scalable to the point where 1 million people can use this, right? Right? And very often what happens is that if you pass the first filter, right, price becomes the problem, right? If you really want to create a fantastic product, it becomes very difficult to do it for like 80 rupees, right? Because you're buying very rare herbs very often, right, which are not even grown, right? You have to have a forest license to be able to pick those in a sustainable way once a year. It's complicated, right? So you're not able to do it in huge scales, right? A lot of our stuff is like very small batch, right? Because, for example, the amlas we use are something with a specific kind of amla called Chota Amla from Pratapgarh, right? Which are smaller but have a much higher concentration potency, right? We use only something called Thar aloe, right? And we go from plant to packed in 4 hours. Because if you leave it exposed, right, it just degrades very quickly, right? So there's a lot of sourcing and process stuff which is very difficult to scale to a very large extent, right? So we're never going to be able to be that mass market, right? We sell something called A2 ghee, right, which is basically from Indian non-genetically modified cows, right?
Yeah,
They make like 5 times less milk than a regular cow, right? Than a Jersey cow or these global cows, and they have much less fat. So the amount of ghee is like 8 times less, right?
Right.
So these things are not things that you can do at huge scale, right? So that's why I said that very clear thing. Our ambition is 5 million people, that we want to kind of give a better product to. I think one of the things we're constantly trying to think about, though, is that how do we create something which is fantastic yet affordable, right? That actually has a much wider impact, right? And currently, that's one of the reasons why we are so passionate about stuff like content, right? Because it helps everyone, right? And a very big part of health, like I said, food is one part of it, right? Is your, daily routine, is your kind of overall exercise, what yoga you're doing, what not to eat, stuff like that, right? So at least, that's something where we feel we can make on a very large scale, right? Product, you hit that ceiling, right? Where if you really want to create a fantastic product, it is going to cost money to build, right? Then that automatically kind of makes it more difficult to make it very, very mass.
And do you directly compete with Baidyanath also? How does that equation work?
Very little, right? Very little. So we have maybe 2-3 products in common, right? But again, very different consumer, right? Very different way we are kind of projecting the product. Very different distribution channel, right? So we find like very little conflict at all, if any. And also, Baidyanath is very much core traditional Ayurveda, right?
What do you see as the exit for investors? An acquisition or a listing or what?
My dream is to list, honestly, right? I love this business. I really enjoy it. I'm really passionate specifically about the product part, right? So as we professionalized, a lot of new people have come in, great talent has come in. They're like people who understand website 10 times better than me. But one thing I'm really passionate about and really love this product, right? Putting my blood, sweat, tears in making the best possible product out there. So, I would like to think of this eventually as a listed business.
Are you also doing content on video or is it only text?
So you're going to see our first big flurry. We are doing content on video on YouTube mostly right now, right?
Okay.
It's not content. So we collaborate with people to create a lot of content, right? So our YouTube sort of content we've created has gotten, I think, the marketing team was just telling me very happily the other day, I think like 30 million views or 40 million views or something.
Wow.
Really cool number. So we do a lot of content co-creation.
So this would be with like Ayurvedic doctors and experts who
Ayurvedic doctors, health experts. So we did a lot of work right now with Pooja Makhija, who's a very famous nutritionist.
Right.
We also now for the first time actually creating our in-house content, right? So content videos on different herbs, benefits, lifestyle, sleep. So that's something we're investing in a lot. We'll be seeing a lot more of that over the next few months as well.
And do you plan to launch a mobile app also?
It's something we're thinking about. We haven't really started anything towards it yet, to be honest, but it's on the cards. Yeah. I think the first, my real belief is that, you really need to be very focused on what you do and what you need to do, you need to get it right? So right now, there's a lot of different things we're doing, right? We're creating we're creating an entire content infrastructure, right, in the organization. We're also doing a lot of stuff. We have a new website launching actually like next 3 days. We've already started the beta. So if you go to Kapiva.in, 10% of people will already start seeing the new website. So there's a lot going on. We want to get this right. Opening too many things together is never a good idea. Definitely something on the cards, but still a little while away.
And how is work split between you and your co-founder? Like, what do you look after?
So I primarily look after product, D2C, bunch of the strategy work, fundraising and things like that. And then we both kind of look at finance sector together. Shrey looks at marketplaces. He looks at full operations, right? He also does, a bunch of, he's also very involved in finance and as well as offline, right? So, honestly, what I'm telling you right now is more kind of the structure maybe 3 months ago. But kind of now as the team has kind of more senior people have come in, there's been more integration there. And then both of us are spending more time doing everything, right? So I think, now the idea is to manage the overall vision, The one thing I still like to spend a lot of time on is product, right? But overall, we've gotten like a very good sort of head of revenue, very good kind of guy so we hired this guy recently, who was the number 2 guy in Uniqlo, to kind of manage marketing as well as operations. We hired a very senior guy who was ex-director of growth at Myntra, then director of growth at Hotstar to like kind of look at revenue as a whole. So honestly, these guys are fantastic, and they are kind of taking a lot of the lead in those kind of things. Over time, I'm still very involved in product, and then making sure all the pieces are working together, and making sure that overall strategy of the organization is moving in the right direction, and then more involved across functions, but less deep in everything.
We hope this conversation inspires you to go natural and introduce more Ayurveda in your life. Check out the entire range of Ayurvedic products from Kapiva on Amazon or at kapiva.in. This episode of Founder Thesis Podcast is brought to you by Long Haul Ventures. Long Haul Ventures is the long haul partner for founders and startups that are building for the long haul. More about them is at www.longhaulventures.com.